I've stood in front of 3 graveyards that changed how I feel about the dark. Not spooky places. Not tourist stops with a ghost story bolted on for the gift shop. Real ground, real history. And in every single one of them, something happened to me that I still can't explain. I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw, what I felt, and what I heard, in order. No skipping the parts that scared me, because if I'm being honest, there's one of these 3 I still think about every night before I turn off the light. Let's start where it started for me, Scotland. I'm the one who goes and finds out if the stories are real. Stick with me for 20 minutes and I'll tell you what's true, what I experienced myself, and what I'd never ever do again. Subscribe before we go in. You're going to want to remember this channel's name later tonight. I flew into Edinburgh with a camera, a notebook, and honestly, a lot of skepticism. I'd read about a graveyard called Greyfriars Kirkyard, an old, beautiful place, famous for a loyal little dog buried near the gate. But I wasn't there for the dog. I was there for the corner they keep locked. You can't get a key to it yourself. I tried. The only way in is a guided tour after dark. And the guide told me one rule before we even reached the gate. Nobody gets left alone in there. The guide called it the Covenanters' prison, and she told me why before we went any further. 300 years ago, over 1,000 men were driven into that field and left there. No shelter, no food. A Scottish winter closing around them until they died where they lay. So many that it's been called one of the first concentration camps in history. And the man responsible is buried a few feet from where I was standing. Sir George Mackenzie. The people who feared him gave him a better name, Bloody Mackenzie. They sealed him inside a heavy black tomb, and for 300 years he stayed exactly where they put him. The guide told me local kids used to dare each other up to that door as children. Knock and whisper, "Bloody Mackenzie, come out if you dare." Nothing ever answered, not for 300 years. Then, in the winter of 1998, someone knocked a lot harder than a child ever did. A homeless man broke that lock, just trying to get out of the rain. In the pitch dark, he went too far in, toward the chamber where the coffins were kept, and the floor gave way under him. He fell straight through into a hidden vault and landed among the Mackenzie dead, in the dust, in the bones. He clawed his way out screaming and ran into the night, sure he'd escaped with his life. He had no idea what he'd let out behind him. And I was about to stand exactly where he fell through. The guide stopped the group by that black tomb, and I felt the temperature drop before she even opened her mouth. And then it hit me. Not a chill. A blow. Something cold and solid slammed into my chest, and I felt myself stagger back before my mind caught up with what had just happened. I put my hand out to catch the wall that wasn't there. Nobody touched me. I checked. Twice. The guide didn't even blink. She just said, "That's usually where it starts." She told me people walk out of that corner with deep scratches torn down their arms. Bruises shaped like fingers wrapped around their throats. Bite marks. People who faint on the spot and have to be carried out through the gate we just walked through. This isn't one dramatic story that got bigger in the retelling. The company with the only keys keeps an actual written log. Hundreds of recorded attacks. By some counts, the number of encounters they've documented now runs into the thousands. That's why the city council did the one thing you never do to a ghost story. They believed it. They sealed the tomb. They locked the whole section behind iron gates. And after what hit me in that dark, so do I. Here's the detail that still keeps me up at night. It didn't stay inside the graveyard. A researcher who'd been studying the case lived in a flat backing right onto that wall. His bedroom, feet from the tomb. He told a journalist that his home started falling apart around him, objects moving on their own, dishes shattering in the night, his belongings destroyed, as if whatever woke up in that vault had followed the fence line in the dark, found the nearest light still on, and let itself in. I slept with the lamp on that night, in a hotel a mile away. I'm not proud of it. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was fear working on my own nerves in the dark. But I stood in that field, on top of 1,000 murdered men, a few feet from the tomb of the man who killed them. And something in that ground put its hand on my chest and pushed. I don't need to believe in ghosts to know that happened. That was something I felt but never saw. The next place I went, I saw her. And once you've seen her, I promise, you don't forget it. Illinois. "25 miles south of Chicago, there's a stretch of forest most people drive past without a second glance. I almost missed the turn myself. There's no road in, just a footpath, and they only allow it open in daylight. I found out why the hard way. The trees closed over my head almost immediately. The road noise died out behind me faster than it should have. And I actually felt the temperature drop before the path opened into one small broken acre of graves. This is Bachelor's Grove. People call it the most haunted cemetery in America. I walked in thinking that was marketing. I walked out thinking it might be an understatement. The history checks out, at least. Settlers in the 1830s. First burials in 1838. About 80 graves filled quietly over 100 years, until the last one, in the 1960s. That's when it stopped being a cemetery and became something else. Abandoned, forgotten, wide open. Vandals came. Stones were smashed, graves torn open. There are old, ugly rumors that the black pond behind the fence was used to make certain bodies disappear. I stood at the edge of that water, and I did not want to know if that part was true. I want to tell you I didn't see anything. That would make this easier. But about 40 minutes in, off through the tree line, I saw a shape in white. Standing still between two stones, long dark hair hanging past her shoulders, and something, small, held against her chest. I lifted my camera. My hands were not steady. By the time I got the shot framed, she wasn't there. They call her the White Lady, the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. And I'm not the only one who's caught her almost in frame. In 1991, a group photographing the cemetery on infrared film got what I never did, an actual, developed frame. Sitting on a stone, calm and patient, wearing a dress from another century, was a woman, pale, faintly glowing. You could see the graveyard right through her. Every one of them swore that spot was empty when they took the shot. That photo went national. For over 30 years, experts have pulled it apart pixel by pixel, hunting for the trick. Nobody's found one. And now I understand why they stopped looking so hard. She's not the only one who walked with me that night. Back in the 1870s, a farmer working the field beside the cemetery lost control of his horse. It bolted straight into that pond. Both of them drowned in the mud. While I was standing near the water, my guide, a local who'd worked the site for years, grabbed my arm without a word and pointed. I saw movement at the tree line. A shape, low and long, moving toward the water. I told myself it was a deer. He told me it wasn't the first time he'd seen the farmer make that same walk. Same direction, same pace, every single time. Then, near the end of the night, I saw a house, off through the trees, white, peaceful. Windows lit gold, a porch light burning like someone had left it on for me. I actually started walking toward it. It looked that normal, that safe. My guide grabbed my arm again, harder this time, and said one word: "Don't." I looked back at the house. It was smaller than it had been 10 seconds earlier. I looked again. It was gone. There is no house in those woods. There never has been. And I have never wanted to run in my life the way I wanted to run in that moment. On the walk back, on a path I'd already walked in, I got turned around, twice. In a forest you can cross in 5 minutes. My camera died with a full battery. My guides did too. Bachelor's Grove isn't haunted by one ghost. It's haunted by an entire dead world. The farmer, the horse, the woman, the child, the house, all of it still there. Still repeating. All of it, I think, waiting for someone to wander too deep and just stay. The path is only open in daylight. I understand that rule now in a way I didn't before I went. A ghost you can photograph is terrifying, but at least I could walk away from it. The last place I went, I couldn't look away from, and for a while, I genuinely didn't want to find out why. Maryland. In Pikesville, Maryland, there's a beautiful old cemetery called Druid Ridge, and in the middle of it, there's an empty pedestal. I stood in front of it for a long time before I understood what I was actually looking at. Something used to sit on that stone. Something an entire generation of Baltimore kids were raised to fear. Something they eventually had to remove and hide from the public. They called her Black Aggie. And even though she isn't here anymore, I could still feel exactly why they took her away. Aggie was a statue, a woman seated, draped head to toe in heavy black bronze, one hand raised toward a face you could never quite see clearly, no matter the angle. She was placed over a general's grave in the 1920s, an unauthorized copy of one of the most famous grief memorials in the country, a statue originally carved to mourn a woman who took her own life. The original was sorrow, made out of bronze. The copy, according to everyone I spoke to in Baltimore, was something else entirely. An older local walked me through the stories that scared him as a kid. He said at midnight, her dead bronze eyes were supposed to open and burn red, and if you were foolish enough to meet them, you'd go blind. He said nothing grew in her shadow. That part I checked myself, in old photographs. For years, the grass under her really was dead and bare. He said that after dark, every soul buried in that cemetery climbed up out of the ground and gathered around her. That she wasn't just a statue, she was where they met. He told me about the dare. Every kid in Baltimore knew it in his generation. If you had the nerve, you climbed the fence in the dark and you sat in Black Aggie's lap. The story went that her cold metal arms would close around you and pull you in, crush you, or drag you straight down. He laughed telling me about it. Then he told me he never actually did it himself. Not once. Not even as a dare from his own friends. I asked him why. He stopped laughing. He told me the story the way it had been passed down to him, that one night, a fraternity used her for a hazing ritual, left one of their own alone at her feet in the dark, and told him to make it until morning. When they came back, he was dead. At the foot of the statue, the cold, officials said. A weak heart, fear itself, There's no clean, documented proof of who he was or exactly when. But nobody in that town needed proof. They already believed what she was capable of. That's why the story never went away. And then he told me the one I still think about. In 1962, one of Black Aggie's arms went missing, torn clean off. And when it turned up, it was sitting in the back seat of a local sheet metal worker's car. He didn't deny having it. He just told them how he got it. He said the statue tore her own arm off, in the dark, and handed it to him. I said that sounded impossible. My guide just looked at the empty pedestal in front of us and said, "Give her 5 minutes alone with you at night, then tell me what's impossible." I did not take him up on it. By the late 1960s, the family had had enough. The trespassing, the vandals, the deaths, the fear. They gave her up, donated Black Aggie to the Smithsonian, keeper of America's treasures. And the Smithsonian didn't put her on display. They put her in storage. A basement, in the dark, turned to the wall. Officially, it's because she was an unauthorized copy of another artist's work. Standing on her empty pedestal that night, I understood why almost nobody in Baltimore fully believes that's the real reason. The pedestal is still empty tonight. Some people in that town still won't drive through that cemetery after dark. The fear was handed to them as children, and it never once let go, even decades later. Aggie sits somewhere quiet now, far from her graves. I stood where she used to sit for almost 10 minutes. I did not sit down. A tomb that put its hand on my chest. A woman I nearly caught on camera. A statue I couldn't make myself sit in front of. 3 real places. I stood in all 3 of them myself. And I'm telling you honestly, I still don't have a clean explanation for any of it. All 3 are still standing right now, tonight, exactly where I left them. So tell me in the comments, which one would you actually go stand in at midnight? Because after making this, I'm not sure I'd go back to any of them alone. If this got under your skin the way it got under mine, subscribe, hit the bell, because next time I'm going somewhere worse.